Good morning, Mr. Palmer. How are you, sir?
Doing good, Mr. Deegan. How about you?
I am fabulous. It's a snowy day in New York. My kids are home. It's a snow day. It's a good day.
We broke freezing the other yesterday, so yay!
Congratulations. I mean, the last time we talked, you were below zero.
Yeah, so we're warming up. It's nice. It's almost like spring.
I was gonna say, you know it's a cold day because I'm actually drinking coffee today instead of my usual caffeine.
Yeah, that's a big red flag for me. John's drinking coffee.
I have a lot of coffee that I have to drink and get out of the cabinet, so yeah, I might as well catch up. But anyways, so what do we have coming up? We've got a big year ahead of us. I know we're still mid-January now, 2024. 2024 is the year Wi-Fi 7. Is it not? I know it's your favorite topic.
Well, so it is, but also, and if people have been listening to this show for a while, if you listen to all of our episodes last year, there's one topic that's sort of kind of associated with Wi-Fi 7, but it's actually it's still new, but it's not specifically to Wi-Fi 7. But it's a topic that John loves to complain about and loves to it's just like his one little like thing. If I want to make John mad, I just have to bring up this subject.
It's not about mad. It's literally it's just been the biggest moving target in Wi-Fi.
It irritates the crap out of you because it's something that we've heard about for many, many years, and we still just keep hearing about it. It's almost like we get teased. So, I didn't go and find this person. I asked around last year, almost a year ago, and I was like, "Hey, who within Ruckus knows about this topic?" And they came back and they said, "Hey, talk to this guy." Well, we have this guy as a guest today. His name is Mark Gibson. So, Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure being here.
One of the things that Mark has been working on for, I don't even want to claim how long he's been working on this one, is AFC. So today, because New Year, we get to dangle the AFC thing of, hey, guess what? It's going to come. We're going to dangle that again. So Mark, just to give you a little bit of background, John's big complaint is he first heard about AFC like 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like,
we've been hearing it's been coming for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the old joke of like, your kids tell you they're coming and you're like, yeah, so is Christmas. We've had a few Christmases since this was supposed to be out, allegedly was supposed to be out, but it's, and Mark and I were talking a little bit about this while you were refilling your Aris cup this morning, Jim. It was probably when it was initially revealed or discussed about a potential due date, it was probably, as Mark said, a little aggressive or wishful thinking, which, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of our Wi-Fi, standards, if you will, a lot of them, come on, how many times have we had draft releases because people thought it was coming out and it was like, well, it's not out yet, but we're product ready, so we're going to ship, and we're just going to call it draft, so sort of it's not the first time we've seen this, but AFC, unlike those past experiences, AFC is kind of a big deal, and it's really, really critical for Wi-Fi 7. I shouldn't say Wi-Fi 7. It's critical for 6 gigahertz. And I know that's a sore subject for Jim, which is a whole different horse of another color. So we figured, Mark is the go-to guy within the CommScope Ruckus family. So we figured we'd bring you on.
Okay. Yeah, so why don't we take a second and let Mark actually introduce himself, since now he's been talking and we've been doing
Why not?
Mark, why don't you tell everybody else kind of who you are, what you are? You just give us the 30-second introduction or 10 seconds.
Glad to. So the guy said, I'm Mark Gibson. I celebrated my 40th anniversary with the company last year, back in September, spending most of my time working in the areas of spectrum management and shared spectrum access. And over the recent past, I've been a lot more focused on dynamic sharing, which is kind of what 6 gigahertz is supposed to be, and some of its predecessors, which included CBRS and SAS, and even before that, something called TV Whitespace. So I've been heavily involved in that, kind of from the regulatory perspective, sort of interfacing with the commission and other regulators internationally, but also interfacing with industry. I am the president of the WIN Forum, and the Wireless Innovation Forum, WIN Forum, came up with a lot of the specifications that are being used, working with the Wi-Fi Alliance. And so my role really has been kind of charging through, and I'm making sense of the regulatory aspect of this, and helping communicate that internally. My degree is in electrical engineering. Got that back in the 80s, and just started with the ComSearch division that was acquired back. I forget when that happened by CommScope, and so I came up through that part of the company, which is the spectrum management realm. So that's basically a sort of a thumbnail on my background.
Yeah, I took credit for for ComSearch being launched at Mobility Field Day. I said it happened in celebration of me being born. So.
Okay, well, that was the year I graduated high school, so.
oh,
it's
Mark,
okay.
You're killing me, dude.
But the beauty part of that, and the point I actually made this to a customer. I was telling Jim I was talking to a customer this week. Because ComSearch is our AFC, platform, but our company basically, or our solution, if you will. And I didn't realize, like, when I started hearing ComSearch mentioned within our documentation and discussions over the past 3 years since I've been here, I figured it was just something new that was put together for the AFC problem, if you will. Everybody wanted you needed something a little bit independent of, you couldn't have a Ruckus AFC provider, but you could have a Ruckus recommended AFC provider. Mm-hmm. So I naively thought, okay, this is something we spun up for AFC. And then I'm looking at this deck that Jim put together for last WLPC, and he's going through the history of it, and he shows the timeline, and I'm like, we were like doing AFC before AFC was a thing in Wi-Fi. And I made that point with my customer, because it's like, there's a lot of different providers, but like we were very clearly, I mean, I'm not saying we were first, maybe we were, maybe we weren't, I don't know. I certainly don't have a pissing match about that, but we've been doing this a long time. Which is
cool. I think you can see the laser pointer here, so you're right. ComSearch started out doing microwave frequency coordination. And, we were hatched in 76, 77. It's kind of a little murky, on the heels of deregulation in the telecom industry, primarily the phone industry in the United States. The consent decree came out from the district court judge, I forget his name, not Waffner, but anyhow, the district court judge in 1973, starting to bust up the bell companies. And that also gave rise to a brand new paradigm, if you will, in microwave deployment, which is microwave frequency coordination. And that's what started ComSearch. And, we were privately held for the first 20 years. Not quite 20 years, about 15 years. And then we were sold to ultimately Andrew Corporation, and Andrew Corporation was acquired by CommScope. But ComSearch has been still doing microwave frequency coordination, and that's what the business unit does primarily. And so what you see here is this map, just a general map of the 6 gigahertz microwave links, just to put some context. But in the, microwave frequency coordination is the core business, but we've had some extensions, in other business areas, and that's where the AFC came from. Kind of recognizing that, there's new things happening in the way frequencies are managed and coordinated, and we need to be at least cognizant of that, if not ahead of it. And that's why we were really involved with AFC. And then again, like I said before that, we were involved with the spectrum access system for 6 gigahertz. So we used a lot of that same thinking and algorithms, to develop the AFC, just to keep abreast of that. And, the fact that, we have Ruckus on board and used to have Eris, so we felt like internally that it made a lot of sense to have an house customer, and keep it sort of in the family, so that, you guys didn't have to, or the Ruckus team didn't have to go out and seek these services from a potential, third party that's outside the company. And a lot of folks that have been doing that haven't been doing it near as long as we have. In fact, I'd say pretty much categorically that we've got more experience in this than anybody else, in many cases combined. And so we just wanted to keep it in the family, and that's kind of, and we're kind of looking at providing services to other entities, but this is primarily, to support the Ruckus devices.
Nice.
The slide deck that John's talking about, I put together because I kind of thought the same thing that John did. I was like, oh, look how, and I apologize. I will fall on this sword for everybody that's in ComSearch. So you can extend my apologies. I was like, oh, look, what a cute little name, Com Search. We came up with our, just to, because I was like Com Scope, Com Search. So
Yeah.
I had to do this presentation, and I was like, well, let me go see what I can find out about Com Search. Just because I was like, this is going to be super short, and all of a sudden I realized I was like, oh yeah, officially it says 1977 on the on all the all this stuff, and so I was like, holy Moses! I mean, if you think about like 1977. Now I was 2 years old. But you were talking about how, things have changed over the time. But I mean, if you think about just how much has changed in the world, I mean, now we have all these automated lookups but I mean, you said your background, was in electrical engineering, and you probably have memories or things of doing like intermod studies by hand without using computer modeling. So, I mean, so if you think about how long ComSearch has been doing this, just frequency coordination, it almost seems, I mean, no offense to the Wi-Fi people, if I was ComSearch, I would look at this and be like, this is kind of trivial just to add in some Wi-Fi stuff. I mean, it's like, we do this, but the footprint's not that big. I mean, when you're talking about dealing with microwave links and not just in 6 gigahertz, but also in other bands, some of these links go 50 kilometers or even longer. I mean, so when you start talking about doing, interference studies across 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers, I mean, these super long distance links, and doing it by hand, you just kind of go, wow, ComSearch really has a heritage, legacy in doing this type of stuff. So, I mean, asking ComSearch to be like, hey, can you handle this little problem with Wi-Fi where, it goes about, maybe 100 meters?
Yeah. Well, I started in 1983, and that was the beginning of the cellular boom. In fact, the first thing I did for several years was complete cellular applications back when they did what they called beauty contests. And so the FCC and the rules that were established under Part 22, they set up 90 different markets in chunks of 30. And I started the company in the second chunk of 30. So it was the second tier of 30 markets. And we actually had to develop applications, for our customers for their cellular mobile radio systems. And at the time, we used a Prime computer. And if you're not familiar with the Prime, I would suggest you read Tracy Kidder's book, The Soul of a New Machine. He talks about that in the context of the Wang computer. And I was introduced to that, to Tracy Kidder, who's written a ton of books like that in the 70s when I was in college. So, so we used a Prime mainframe. We all had dumb terminals. We had to go down and load terrain data using tapes and everything. And now, we all use, computers, desktop computers, and have really sort of state-of-the-art software. And, I'll touch on this, as we get into this. What's interesting is the new rulemaking the commission has put out to address very low power operation is talking about putting the AFC type algorithms on the device. So the device has a degree of autonomy. Right now, it has to be centralized. So, in the 40 years I've been sort of in this business, it's probably been the most active, I'd say, of any time. It's been fascinating. And, and ComSearch has been in the middle of all of the, the sharing aspects. We're dealing with stuff that's not even related to Wi-Fi right now. Dealing with sharing with radar systems in the 3 gigahertz band and all kinds of other really interesting things. Before we started, we were talking about radar systems and the radar systems that are in the 5.9 gig band, the DFS radars, which are the terminal Doppler weather radar. A lot of that came out of work that had been done in just general sharing with high-powered radar systems and that weren't even part of this. And we were part of that as well. So it's interesting. When I tell people what I do spectrum management. They look at me like I've got 4 heads. And then I tell them, this is probably the most important aspect of mobile phone in your life that you're not aware of. And then they look at me like I've only got 1 head, and then I explain it. So it has been interesting.
And, I'm still going to hijack this. You can't see me, but I am just super geeked at all the stuff you've been talking about, because spectrum management and spectrum interference and spectrum, I mean, it sounds like something that should be fairly simple, especially to Wi-Fi people. And I don't think Wi-Fi people really understand or get exactly how complicated and how in depth this stuff is. And to your point, exactly how critical this stuff is. And, so I'm geeking out over here. We could go on for hours, but.
Well, you're right. And I mean, just a sort of shout out to Spectrum Management, it is, like I said, we just completed the quadrennial ITU conference, which is called the World Radio Administrative Conference, completed last month, ran from the week of Thanksgiving till December 15th in Dubai. And it's where all of the regulators and others with interest gather, in a central location to hash out the use of the radio frequency spectrum. And so that is so important. It occurs only every 4 years. So we spend 4 years getting ready. And it was interesting. It occurred at the same time. There was an economic summit in Dubai, but it was in another city. I forget where it was. So, and you'd hear all about that and nothing about the work. And so yeah, I find it interesting. It's arcane. You're right. Most people don't understand the importance of the airwaves. There was a former commissioner of the FCC that characterized it pretty well, is that spectrum is the oxygen that radio systems use. And I think that's a pretty good characterization, because without spectrum, you can't use it. And it touches every aspect of our lives, whether we know it or not. Your TV set, the smart part aspect of your TV set uses Wi-Fi. It used to be the TV programming came in over the air. All the stuff that's unlicensed, the microwave ovens, Bluetooth, it's all part of this whole notion of spectrum. And as we move into 6G, we're opening up new spectrum horizons in higher bands to enable all kinds of really new use cases that you can only dream about. There was an interesting announcement that was made just this week that John Deere, who build huge tractors, is working with SpaceX to provide what's called precision agriculture, so that tractors can travel autonomously in fields without any human intervention. So when you think about that all it relies on wireless spectrum to happen. So it's like I said, it's probably the most important aspect of our lives that nobody really knows about.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, this might sound weird, but I would give a lot to get to that conference in 4 years from now, because that just sounds so fascinating and interesting. But that's anyway.
Jim, you've found your herd.
Yeah,
I am enjoying this way too much this early in the morning. But anyway, now that I've I haven't satisfied my curiosity. We could go on for hours, but we don't have hours. So let's actually see if we can actually get back to the topic at hand. And I'm not looking for specifics. I'm not looking for, guarantees, because let's face it, AFC has been the dangling carrot for years now. Can you give us a quick update of where are we with AFC? Are we getting closer, or does it feel like it's always like 2 quarters away? I mean, it always, to me, feels like, it's coming in 6 months, and every 6 months it just keets getting pushed. Are we still in that mode?
And I think part of that is my being the one that's trying to communicate this internally by setting expectations, but by not being the messenger that people want to kill. Because the issue you've got with this is the FCC is in the middle of it, and the FCC as a regulator really has to proceed, with caution. They're comfortable that the way they've sort of charted for this is appropriate, and they have to adhere to something called the Administrative Procedures Act, which means that they have to take input from all sides. And so they really have been proceeding with a note of with a process of caution. Lessons learned from CBRS and the SAS. And if you think this is taking long, that took 4 years to accomplish the same thing that we've accomplished in really a year and a half. What happens generally in these things is the FCC issues a rulemaking, and that rulemaking came out in 2018. And there were a lot. And so what happens is that they say, we think we'd like to do this. What do you all think? You all being anybody that has interest in it. And so for 2 years, they entertained comments back and forth from folks that were really all in like the Wi-Fi providers, OEMs, chip manufacturers, us, people that want to manage the spectrum, us again, and then the people that have issues with it, primarily the incumbents, and then also, the wireless carriers, who feel the spectrum should be managed differently. It should be licensed and auctioned, and there's that. And so the process took so much time because there was a lot of interest. The comments are filed online on what's called a docket, and there's over 2,000 substantive comments that have been filed on this since the beginning. And by the time they issued the rulemaking in 2020, they had about 1,500. So the commission was sort of overwhelmed with all of that, and then they had to parse through and sort that out, because what happens is after the notice of proposed rulemaking, they cogitate on that, they get all the input, they meet with people, and then they issue what's called a report and order. And then the report and order is where the rules are. And so after the rules came out, then, which sort of said, here's how the AFC is going to work, then they had to go down the road of certifying the AFC, and that has taken another 2 years. And so, and you guys have probably seen all the timelines I put out, through some of the folks on the product management side, and then just in general. And those were based on, sort of looking head down a little bit at where we are, and assuming best case with the FCC being able to get things done, on a more expeditious basis than they did for the other things like CBRS and TV whitespace, with a full docket of information and trying to sort things out. However, things happen. Funding, federal funding happens. I'm in the DC area, and so we live and breathe the government shutdowns and stuff like that. Fortunately, there was no government shutdown in the middle of this, but what happens is when there's a threat of a shutdown, the FCC has to go through a process of contingency on how they're going to operate during shutdown, because many aspects of the commission's work are considered essential. And that pulls focus from some of the other things. Not a lot, but it is a thing that's in the air there that they have to deal with. And then there's just things taking longer. There's politics that get involved, and just so if there's one takeaway from this, I think that we could learn in the future is we absolutely need the regulator involved, but we need the regulator to be more on the sidelines as opposed to sort of controlling the game. And that, that sentiment is not new. Many have expressed that in general. So that's sort of the backdrop on where we are and what leads us to where we are now. So what has happened over the last 3 or 4 months? The FCC for the AFCs required really two things we had to do to get certified. One was the AFC systems had to be submitted for third-party testing pursuant to a test plan that was developed in concert between the WIN Forum, Wireless Innovation Forum, and the Wi-Fi Alliance. And so there was a series of test vectors, which was just simply, if you do this, this is what's supposed to happen. They run the test to make sure that happens, and bingo, we get that done, and a report is generated. So that has to happen. The other thing the FCC wanted to do was to have AFC administrators open up their AFCs to allow the public, and the public is anybody you can think of with an interest, to get in and, according to the commission, verify that the AFC is providing correct results. They didn't say anything about what are correct results. They just said that's what the public trial phase is supposed to be about. And so that had a defined time frame that got extended for an extra 15 days just because of some issues that occurred. And that finalized back in the beginning of December. And so the AFCs then had to submit both the third-party testing and the report for the third-party testing, and then the report on the public trial to the commission. And then the commission is reviewing that, and that's where we are right now by virtue of this first bullet. All testing and public trial phases have completed for 7 of the participating AFC admins. You see the list there, and we're on that list. And so right now, we're waiting for the commission to issue a certification public notice that says we have reviewed the test reports and the public trial reports from these AFC administrators, and they are blessed to go on and provide commercial service. And we're waiting for that. And I spoke with a fellow at the commission that I know. He's high up in the Office of Engineering Technology last week to get a sense of the timing. And he's saying anytime. Now, they've been telling me anytime for the last 2 years, which is why this thing looks like it has been interminable. But we're at the point where there's nothing more that needs to happen. All of the hurdles have been crossed. All the ladder rungs have been climbed. All of the things that AFCs have had to do have been done. So now it's really up to the commission to issue the final certification public notice, and that's where we are for the AFC. Now, it doesn't make any sense to have an AFC and then have no devices. So the other thing the commission is looking at is the certification of standard power devices. And they've never done this before. And so you can look back at TV Whitespace kind of as an example, because it's very similar. And for those that don't know TV Whitespace, it was a framework that allowed unlicensed operation of devices in the spaces where TV systems were not being used. And this goes back to the 2008 up to 2012. And so it was very similar. It was unlicensed devices. Wi-Fi wasn't really interested in this. There was an 802.11, I think it was AY, which is Wi-Fi over white space, which had gotten some marginal uptake. But anyhow, so the commission really had no framework to certify devices that would be operated on the AFC. And the one aspect of this, that's two aspects of this that are really most important, other than the regular conformity that we all are pretty familiar with, or conformance testing, which is ensuring that it doesn't transmit more than the required ERP, or EIRP. Doesn't have the out-of-band emissions beyond the required masks and whatnot, was the interaction with the AFC and the location determination. One of the aspects of these unlicensed white space devices, standard power devices, is that they have to be able to know where they are. And operating outside, that's really not a problem. Just get GPS and you're pretty much good to go. But operating indoors is challenging. And there's been a whole host of methods that have come up for this. Mostly they came out of the E911 days, the extended 911 or enhanced 911 to do a cell phone geolocation indoors. So when we as a company started looking at this, as well as others, we were trying to figure out how to do this along with everybody else. So the commission really didn't know what to expect, and what they put in the requirements for a device certification was this thing called a persistence inquiry approval, which was requiring 3 filings to describe your geolocation methodology. One was a description of the methodology. The other was a certification, or at least an attestation of the accuracy. And the third was, how will this system work on power up after power down? And so when I talked to the commission about this last week, they indicated that they were sort of overwhelmed by these PIA filings. Not so much the number, although, when you consider the 3 filings, that's, 36 different documents, many pages, but they were really complicated. A lot of statistical mathematics goes into determining device location accuracy. And it was beyond the capabilities of the guys in the lab. So they've gotten bogged down in the review of the applications. The other thing they didn't feel that they wanted to do was to get devices approved before the AFCs were approved, because you basically would be all dressed up with nowhere to go. So the way this is happening now is it looks like AFC devices or AFCs will be certified a few weeks to maybe a month or so, it could be even 6 weeks, in advance of devices being certified. But we should have the certification of everything certainly within the first quarter of this year. And so that's where we are with AFC, pretty much right now.
Nice. So it's coming. We just, it's the cool thing, and I wish, unfortunately, we were still figuring out this new platform, but Jim's got this, it's beyond ear-to-ear smile, because this is just this is the bits that he loves more than he ever can express. But so everybody that's listening can understand, we've heard about this for a while, but there's just, to say there's a lot of moving parts is an understatement. Which kind of leads me to my follow-up on this. I know you mentioned, Mark, that there's on the slide, there's I think there's 7 providers here. I think there's more than that, or there could be more than that. but are all the providers the same? Like if I choose one versus the other, is there going to be any functional difference, or is it basically just a matter of everybody's providing the same? It's just who are you using kind of thing?
That's a great question. It's interesting because the commission does not want us to compete on providing a better answer, because that means that if there's a better answer, there's a not so better answer, and then the not so better answer could mean that incumbents are put at risk. And so we have all had to certify to pretty much the same set of requirements. So that means that among the 7, nobody is going to be able to provide a result that puts the microwave system at risk. So we're all pretty much doing the same thing, but doing it the same way. That's where we have some facility to innovate, And so Broadcom, for example, Wireless Broadband Association and Wi-Fi Alliance came up with this process called Open AFC. I don't get into the details. It was something that came out of the formerly Meta's Telecom Infra Project, or TIP. They sort of built an AFC that was open. In other words, they had open software standards, and they made it available for anybody that wanted to do it. We did not do it that way because we have core software that we use to run our microwave frequency coordination business that we could leverage, that we felt was more accurate, insofar as we could find areas where that we could take, for example, better use of the data. We have full data on microwave systems, including radio data and antenna data that's not available to the other guys because they have to use all they have is the FCC data. So we can do some additional stuff on that. And what that means is that we can provide situations where there no better where there's situations where there will or will not be interference. So there's also ways to innovate in terms of how you provide the solution, how you pick a cloud provider, how you interoperate with that cloud, and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we all have to do the same thing. And for a given set of inputs, we have to provide pretty much the same outputs. A lot of it is how quickly you do it and how accurate they are.
Nice. And, that was something that, I learned about the databases. So I thought that was super interesting because, one of the things that I came from in my previous life, and you mentioned it, was Andrew.
Yeah.
Because I was a huge fan of Andrew back in the 90s. I used Andrew all over the place. And so it's like, it's just that it goes back to that history and the lineage and everything about just doing wireless. You talked about TV white space and all this. And we got to fix this, John, because this is like one of the best conversations I've had in a very long time. I'm absolutely loving this.
Cool.
Unfortunately, we're actually running out of time, Mark. I cannot believe that. John and I have been chatting on the side, just going, man, we could go on for hours. This is such amazing stuff. But we kind of do got to wrap this up. But I wanted to ask, is there anything that, if there was something about AFC that you would want, not just people like John and I who work for Ruckus, but like end users and customers, people that are going to be, sort of implementing an AFC solution in their network, is there, you have any tips or suggestions or anything for these customers about, hey, when you get to this, after it's certified, and when you get to this point where you're going to start deploying an AFC, what are a couple of things that customers need to kind of think about and take into consideration when this opens up, hopefully in the next, quarter or two?
Yeah. I'd say I look at that from two perspectives. I would say our Ruckus customers should not have to worry about the AFC. It comes with packaged up, frankly, with it, and to the end user, whomever that may be, whether it's a consumer or an enterprise, the AFC is more or less just like your EMS, your or whatever network management system you have. It's kind of transparent to the end user. You will see it manifest sometimes in things that happen. For example, when the device goes down or you shut it off for some reason, it might not come back up as quickly as it would otherwise. But it's only by a matter of a couple of seconds. And I wouldn't be don't be scared of the AFC. The AFC is there to protect you and to protect the operation of these systems in a universe where there's other systems operating. This is what is allowing access to this 1200 or at least 850 megahertz of spectrum. So that's the first takeaway I would suggest is don't worry about the AFC. We're there for you. So that's to the Ruckus customers. To any customers of the ComSearch, I would say, when you look at the AFC providers that are up there, look at two things. One is look at their knowledge of the ecosystem and the awareness that we have of who we're dealing with, both the commission, FCC, the incumbents, and whatnot, and then how we apply that to the development of the end product. We have put a lot of our 50 years almost of expertise into our AFC. And I think that nobody else can say that. Qualcomm, until this happened, had never even thought about dynamic spectrum management, and their business drivers are different than ours. The other thing we bring to it, at least in the domestic realm, is a much better understanding of the data and the ability to leverage that data into the operation of the AFC to fine-tune the results. So those are the two takeaways I'd say are probably the most important for that.
Nice. It's gold. Jim and I are talking in the background, not to be rude, but it's just, this is stuff that, honestly, and we're going to pat ourselves on the back because it is our podcast, but this is stuff that we just, the folks in the wireless community, I think there's a gap in, and I don't know if it's just because it's been taking so long to come out or whatnot, but there's definitely, a lot of sort of, I feel like we're in limbo. There's a lot of kind of gray area. Maybe it's not getting enough attention. And, knowing that it's going to, well, I shouldn't say knowing it's going to happen in 2024, but knowing it should happen in 2024 based on what we've heard, I think people are going to start getting a lot more serious about it. So I think this is a great sort of primer, if you will. And I will say this, and I certainly don't have to question what Jim is thinking, but Mark, I appreciate it. And you will have an open invitation anytime you want to come back. Jim has some ideas. We'll talk about it offline. But, I'm sure once AFC becomes a thing, we can expect a follow-up scheduled with you because this is, like Jim said, we could have ran this for hours and made this a few episodes. And there's information here that I guarantee a lot of the Wi-Fi people listening to this may not have even heard. I'm sure that people were chalking up the delays just a typical government taking way too long because it's big government instead of realizing that there's so many different approving bodies and processes and everything else going into it. And it really is happening. It's just, it's a lot to happen and it's a lot of coordination. No pun intended.
The one thing I would take away from all of this is something that you said there at the end, Mark, and it kind of wrapped up the past 40 minutes of what we've been talking about is that, don't be afraid of AFC because, the AFC, we're there for you. I wrote that down. I'm just like, that is so, and I think once you understand, and now that we have some context and some color behind, why it's taken so long, the 1,500 comments that had come in by 2020, and then the 2,000 comments, and I've read some of those comments, and I will go on record on this podcast of saying that, a lot of times people look at the FCC and say, they're really, they're not there for the Wi-Fi community. But I can tell you, reading some of these comments, that the FCC, I feel, has done a very good job on this of saying, Wi-Fi needs a seat at the table. So, don't be afraid of AFC. This is my takeaway is because after hearing all the color and context, Mark, that you've been able to provide, it tells me that, once it's finally released and once it's, something that we can deploy at a large scale, now I feel a lot more comfortable because it's not just, bureaucracy that slowed it down. It's really doing a lot of work to make sure that when it does finally release, it's something that works and we don't have to go back and fix it 7 or 8 times. So
that's a great takeaway. Good. Yeah.
This has been an amazing time. And so I cannot thank you enough for joining us to kind of add this color and context and give us the Wi-Fi community a little bit more of a better feeling about AFC in general. So
cool. Good.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Great questions.
Thank you, sir. We'll definitely have you back on, Mark. We will. This was the tip of the iceberg. As much detail, as much information you just provided in 40 minutes. This was just the tip of the iceberg. And Jim, I'm sure I could just give him the keys to the platform, and he and you could give us like an 8-hour episode, and it still wouldn't give him all the stuff he wants to talk about. So, without taking up all of your day, I think we'll call it a wrap. Thank you again. I don't have anything else, Jim. This was your Christmas present. Like a month late, it was your Christmas present.
It really is.
It looks like a kid at Christmas morning, folks. And anybody who's watching on video can actually see it, so that's great. Mark, again, thank you. We'll catch you again sometime later this year, I'm sure. And everybody else, we'll catch you on the next episode.
Awesome. Looking forward to it, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
All righty. Take care.
If you want to contact the show directly, you can email us using the address ruckcast@comscope.com. To learn more about Ruckus products and services that we may have talked about on this or any other podcast, please check the links in the About section of the show.